move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr. Martin Docherty-Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I didn't know it was that popular with members of the government backbenches. I think there may be...
Thank you.
Point of order. No, we're not having any of that. That is not fair. The honourable gentleman is popular, and it's very good that there are so many people here to listen to him. We'll tell him later why. Martin Docherty-Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that Mr Speaker has given to raise an issue that I think we can all agree deserves wider attention and scrutiny. And I don't think I've ever done an adjournment debate on a Wednesday, or one so well attended, I have to say. And I don't think I've ever done an adjournment. I'm so glad I have to be would be actually done relatively a decent hour, because I do know there's something happening after this adjournment debate within this very chamber. Now, I want to start with the debate with an appeal to the front bench of the government, and also to anyone else who might be thinking of intervening. Now, it is clear I'm a member of the Scottish National Party, and this is a debate that does concern the UK's nuclear enterprise. On this level, I think it might be fairly predictable, but I hope in preparing for this debate that the Minister, I hope, has left all the kind of customary, usual stuff reserved for SNP MPs discussing the nuclear weapons in this place. I do hope he's left them at home or in the MOD, because it may be tempting to play to our bases in terms of this debate and to paint this as yet another, forgive me for saying it, Madam Deputy Speaker, and close to Burns night, haggis-munching, bust bagpipe whinging again. But I hope we can all agree the trigger for this debate was some very serious allegations from a senior official. And I think people across these islands who live beside or in the vicinity of nuclear-regulated sites deserve to hear a response to these allegations. And also glad to see the Shadow Secretary of State is in his position as well. Not right now, but if you just allow me for a moment. Now, I have to say I'm going to set aside my own and my party's well-known and understood standpoint on the morality and utility of the nuclear enterprise to focus on the specifics of the allegations made in the blog of the 30th of December by a well-known former adviser, Dominic Cummings. And I hope that the Minister will reciprocate and show the House the respect it deserves. And as another small caveat, let me make it clear from the outset that I understand, Madam Deputy Speaker, three things about Dominic Cummings. That he certainly has his own well-published agenda when it comes to issues around the civil service, especially around civil service reform, that he is demonstrably not as clever as he actually thinks, and finally, that he has also been known to present dead-cat arguments as a distraction from his own shortcomings. In this instance, that the Prime Minister chose not to rehire him as an adviser. I'll give way to my right honourable.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. The honourable gentleman and I will have different opinions about nuclear ability, and I believe we should have it. The honourable gentleman says no, but on this issue I think we agree in relation to safety. Does the honourable member not recognise that our need for nuclear defence is imperative to the security of this nation to fulfil international obligations, and yet this cannot be achieved without substantial investment? However, this is not optional. The money must be found, and found now, to ensure nuclear safety, but equally important, nuclear ability.
My answer to the honourable gentleman is he might as well stay for the rest of the adjournment debate to find out my point on that. I have to say about Mr Cummings' former role and the nature of the allegations, Madam Deputy Speaker, he made such that it is frankly bizarre, at least from my perspective, that the only attempt to scrutinise them is not in front of a parliamentary committee, but in what, frankly, is usually the graveyard spot of parliamentary business. Parliament, I would say, Madam Deputy Speaker, I guess, is sovereign in everything apart from the nuclear enterprise. Now, I am afraid going to quote Mr Cummings' blog quite extensively here today, and I would hope that the Minister would have already read it, but it is important to have it read into the record of the House. There are two principal aspects I would like the Government to respond to. Firstly, the state of the defence nuclear infrastructure across these islands, and then a decision-making process in the civil service and how this relates to democratic oversight. Now, I should also say, before the Minister uses up time from his response to say it, I am not expecting in any shape or form for the Minister to comment on operational matters. And I understand that much to do with the nuclear enterprise cannot be discussed publicly. So let us begin. Unfortunately, Madam Deputy Speaker, I cannot leave out all the internal party machinations of the Conservative Party's psychodrama, as some of it, I'm afraid, is quite pertinent. Now, Cummings begins. I did have two conversations with the Prime Minister, the first in 2022, just after he became PM. The PM wanted an actual plan including how to get a grip of power and get things done, a political strategy and a political machine to change the political landscape and beat Labour. In 2022, I said I might do it, but my conditions were the ability to ensure that the urgent action is proceeding on a range of fundamental, critical issues, including the scandal of nuclear weapons infrastructure, which is a dangerous disaster and a budget nightmare of hard-to-believe and highly classified proportions, and which has forced large-scale and large-secret cannibalisation of other national security budgets. Now, building defences for natural and engineered pandemics, the scandal of MOD procurement ignored despite, even because of, the biggest war in Europe since 1945, AI and other technological capabilities, the broken core government institutions, including the dumpster fire of the Cabinet Office. He ends this section by saying, in all of these areas I started crucial work in 2019-20. Most of this has stopped, slowed or reversed. Now, not all of this is pertinent, Madam Deputy Speaker, and particularly with the last line there we see Cummings' own agenda coming through. Nonetheless, I would say bullet points 1, 3 and 5 are the most interest to us here. Now let's start with 1 and 3 and we'll come back to 5 later on. Cummings continues. For example, in 2020 we agreed, and I think this is important for the entire House, via a secret tunnel process with the services, His Majesty's Treasury, might have been Her Majesty's at the time, and Cabinet Office, chaired by the Cabinet Secretary and me, but kept secret from Wallace, the first agreed by everyone to be honest MOD budget numbers since before 2010. Agreed how to plug the massive black hole partly created by the nuclear enterprise disaster. Agreed a range of disasters that should be stopped immediately, for example, Ajax, Challenger, and agreed a plan for procurement reform and new capabilities to build. Also, note well, the Army did not lobby for a bigger army. In the world that seemed possible in 2020, of a serious plan and honest numbers and procurement reform, etc. They preferred a smaller army with real capabilities to a bigger but increasingly Potemkin army. He goes on. Instead, the MOD has been allowed to pocket the money for the black hole, avoid stopping the disasters, continue pumping more money down the drain of legacy disasters, creating a new black hole, continue to allow critical parts of the nuclear weapons infrastructure to rot, creating further massive secret budget nightmares, as well as extremely serious physical dangers. CF the recent near disaster with a submarine. Continue, as normal, with disastrous procurement policy and practice instead of taking industrial capacity seriously. Continue sacrificing critical new capabilities to fund legacy failures. Shred the honest budget numbers and return to the fraudulent numbers. And I think most critical, Madam Deputy Speaker, and continue lying even more to MPs and media about it all. So let me repeat myself, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do not expect the Minister to comment on operational matters or give away classified information. But can we at least agree these are serious allegations of both a specific and more general matter? Specifically, when summing up, I wonder if the Minister can comment on the suggestion that the nuclear enterprise is causing the large secret cannibalisation of other national secret budgets. To add a little bit of context, and while it should be tempting to pass this off as a ranting of a former jilted senior adviser, this tallies actually with a lot of what we've heard from recent National Audit Office reports. Now, the last Audit Office report received just in December not only revealed the plan was unaffordable, that the MOD acknowledged this fact, that this funding gauge could range between, or gap should I say, could range between 7.6 and 29.8 billion, but that the nuclear and Royal Navy costs show the greatest increase compared with 2022. The Navy, of course, being the service which is responsible for the continuous at-sea deterrent. Furthermore, in paragraph 16 of the report, key findings, it stated quite clearly that the creation of a ring fence around nuclear funding helps protect the MOD's highest defence priority, but puts greater pressure on programmes not included in it. So I wonder, in summing up, will the Minister acknowledge that the ring fencing is putting pressure on the rest of the conventional budget, and if so, do they think it's sustainable? And will they be able to tell the House what plans the Government has to mitigate the dead hand or the dead hand of ring fencing? There is, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think, an unfortunate logic to this nuclear ring fence within the Government's, I think, well-intentioned ring fence around defence spending, be it at 2 or 2.5%. At this moment, every penny spent on the nuclear enterprise is a penny less spent on conventional assets, at a time when conventional threats are proliferating, a point I made in this very place not a few hours ago. Now, Cummings adds a dash of colour to the NAO's necessarily black and white findings about MOD mismanagement and dysfunction. Taken together, they are a damning indictment of where defence finds itself. And it's something of a shame there is something of a taboo of actually discussing the contribution of the nuclear enterprise to this predicament, because there are undoubtedly massive consequences and contingencies that need to be developed surrounding a large transition, as one of the nuclear enterprises undertaking just now. We know this because HMG already went through a similar translation through the resolution to Vanguard. We also know because of the excellent and the definitive official history of the Royal Navy Submarine Service, written by Peter Hennessy and, of course, James Jinks, a book I would recommend to members, The Silent Deep, released in 2015, that there were extensive plans made for worst-case scenarios during that transition, including, and I quote, Madam Deputy Speaker, moving a Polaris submarine into Loch Long, where it would dive and remain in a static location on quick action alert. Now, again, I am not asking the Minister to comment on operational issues, but there is a pattern emerging of events and scenarios which are consistent with reports and papers written by nuclear analysts dealing with the consequences of an ageing platform with the backdrop of a defence budget put under pressure by an increasingly dire economic situation. Now, whether it's by the accident involving a Vanguard-class submarine, which we spoke about in this place in November, an accident Cummings attributes to poor infrastructure, or a rather pitiful sight in September of another Vanguard-class boat returning to Naval Base Clyde in September, looking rather worse for wear for only the MOD to release a statement praising the crew for the longest SSBN patrol, something I'm afraid doesn't quite add up. Now, I know we can sometimes stray too close to specifics, and I want to get back to another aspect of the Cummings blog, and one which was, if anything, more worrying for me, and which brings us into the parliamentary aspect of the title of this evening's debate. This paragraph states, since we left, Number 10 has allowed even more and even encouraged all of this. The cycle of disaster, cheat, lie and classify even more has continued through successive defence reviews. For example, the infamous Headwood wedge, overseen by Haywood, Osborne and Macpherson in 2015. We drew a line under this systematic lying and delusion in 2020, and after I left, the line was immediately deleted and business, as usual, has continued. The system is preparing to give Starmer the same horrific choices on above strap 3 yellow paper and continue to cycle of classify, punt and lie, with everything becoming even more hollow Potemkin as a result. There is a lot, Madam Deputy Speaker, for us to focus on the idea that systems, as he says, is preparing to give Starmer, as I said, that same situation. And it's nothing more than an insinuation that there are, it seems, senior members of the civil service, according to Cummings, and according to Cummings, the armed forces, who are planning to manipulate an incoming Prime Minister, and one whose recent polls are to believe will have a significant mandate. Not only that, but they have used the protocols and security around the nuclear enterprise to manipulate the current Prime Minister and his predecessors, along with seeking to remove any aspect of cabinet decision-making by excluding the then Defence Secretary from these discussions. Now, as I have said, and my party do not agree with this or with previous government's policies around nuclear weapons, regardless, this is not the debate we are on the topic of debate tonight, but about the way His Majesty's government implements its own declared policy. But it's unfortunate but inescapable reality about the nuclear enterprise that many of the discussions around it cannot be held. And I will come to a conclusion. The Minister can get his 10 minutes, don't worry, and then his photograph, don't worry. The whole number of discussions must therefore be taken in an increasingly tight series of concentric circles. The one fig leaf for our parliamentary democracy has always been that, at the end of it all, there is an element of democratic oversight in the Prime Minister, Defence Secretary and, on occasion, Foreign Secretary having input into the nuclear strategy. So, yes, I will.
I think I'm not interrupting. I am momentarily interrupting the honourable gentleman. Look, it's simply rude to talk. If whispering has to be done, then whisper. But it's really just rude to talk. Martin Docherty-Hughes.
Getting late to my honourable friend, Madam.
I congratulate my honourable friend on securing this debate on what is a really crucial issue. He talks about the secrecy around this whole issue, and I wonder if he'd know of my the response the MOD gave to my most recent questions on safety at its nuclear bases. It confirmed an alarming trend, with the number of incidents at Fastlane and Coalport jumping by a third in 2022, and figures for the start of 2023 suggesting further rises. Would he agree that we surely have a right as MPs in this place to know why safety records aren't improving, as well as the nature of these incidents and their effects on local residents and the environment?
I couldn't disagree with my honourable friend at all. Of course, if any of the allegations made by Dominic Cummins, critically ones around senior government ministers, are being manipulated, are without merit, I'd be glad to hear it, Madam Deputy Speaker. Especially, or those civil servants themselves should address it directly. So let me bring my remarks to a close. The final plea for the Minister. I know people are here for their picture to be taken. It might be useful, it might be their last parliamentary one they'll ever have. But anyway, so let me bring my remarks to a close, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the final plea for the Minister to stick to the substance of some basic questions I'm asking him. And we know the opinion on the nuclear enterprise, I know that. I may make it a bit easier. Just two questions. If they don't want to address anything else that I've actually said, can the government advise what it's doing to ensure that the nuclear enterprise does not continue to exert undue pressure on the rest of the defence budget? And what safeguards are there to ensure that there remains a robust and genuine democratic oversight of all aspects of that enterprise?
Minister James Cartlidge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I congratulate the honourable gentleman for bringing this important debate this evening, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is true that we differ fundamentally on the issue of the deterrent, and indeed there is such passion and commitment to it on this side that we have a fantastic turnout this evening, Madam Deputy Speaker. The key theme of his speech is about parliamentary scrutiny, and I quote, he said, "Parliament is sovereign everywhere except in the nuclear deterrent." Well, I'll just remind him that when my right honourable friend became Prime Minister in 2016, one of the first key votes in this House was on the renewal of Trident, and the majority was 355 in favour. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be clear, the UK's independent nuclear deterrent is a matter of the highest priority for this government, as I say, borne out by the support from the backbenches today, and I welcome the opportunity to set out our approach and policies in this area. Our continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent is the cornerstone of our national defences and central to the government's national security strategy. We place the utmost importance on the upkeep of all of our nuclear defence infrastructure and its upgrades. Yes. To be clear, HMNB Clyde has an establishment management plan with a 40-year horizon that covers both the Faslane and Coolport sites, and the government seeks to be as transparent as possible about our nuclear defence infrastructure within obvious national security constraints. I'm going to take one intervention from the Honourable Lady.
The Minister talks about transparency, but in 2017, the publication of the annual reports of the Defence Nuclear Safety Regulator, the MOD's internal watchdog, was stopped under his government. Why was that?
Well, I have to say to the Honourable Lady, I've enjoyed the fact that she's tabled a number of written questions on these matters, and I have always answered them as transparently as possible, setting out the full facts, and we will continue to do so. Indeed, the very point of being here is that we are transparent in Parliament about our deterrent. So we engage fully with Parliament, including the Defence and Scottish Affairs Committees, and we will continue to do so. We annually publish transparency data for all major defence programmes, including nuclear infrastructure, and in line with industry good practice, our nuclear sites have well-established and transparent systems for raising what are known in the industry as nuclear site event reports, which the Honourable Lady has asked a number of written questions about. This open documentation of human error, procedural or documentation failings and equipment issues provides the strongest illustration of our commitment to transparency. More importantly, it fosters a culture of continual improvement and enhances the rigour of our collective approach to safety. Madam Deputy Speaker, the safety of our nuclear defence infrastructure is paramount. Our nuclear establishments fully adhere to current...
I don't want to interrupt the Minister. I've said this before, but everybody seems to think it's funny to ignore it. It's fine to whisper if you need to communicate with one another, but it's just simply rude to talk at the top of your voice so that I can hear what people are saying on the back benches and I can't hear the Minister. It's just not right, and it's just simply discourteous. Minister.
I think they're very enthused, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our nuclear establishments fully adhere to current regulatory and operational requirements, and they are subject to a painstaking programme of maintenance by highly trained experts. And to ensure their reliability and safety far into the future, we are carrying out a £1.4 billion upgrade of our nuclear facilities at HMNB Clyde. This will ensure they are ready to receive the next generation Dreadnought class of submarines. And as colleagues would expect, all these improvements are being made in line with current and foreseeable future regulatory requirements. To conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, we can't look after our nuclear infrastructure without highly trained people, and to support our future submarine programmes, we're investing around £200 million in world-class training for our current and future submariners. The Government has robust maintenance programmes in place to deal with some of the challenges to non-nuclear infrastructure at HMB Clyde, and we will continue to do everything we can to ensure our nuclear deterrent infrastructure both keeps us safe and continues to adhere to the most stringent safety and regulatory standards.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.